Alira had long abandoned the hope of hearing another voice. The planet Eris 9 was a barren, wind-scoured wasteland, its sky a perpetual swirl of violet storms and crimson lightning. It was a place where nothing grew, where water existed only as ice beneath the surface, and where the sun was little more than a distant, flickering ember in the cold, unfeeling cosmos. She had survived here for 6 cycles, 6 long, grueling solar orbits, since the catastrophe that had torn her research vessel from the sky and left her stranded with no hope of rescue. At first, she had sent distress signals. Over and over, her messages had been transmitted across the stars, bouncing through the void, hoping to be caught by a passing ship, by a listening station, by anyone. But the silence had been unrelenting. She was alone. At least, that was what she thought. Until the human crashed. It was the screaming that woke her. Not a biological scream. Eris 9 had no life beyond herself. This was the scream of metal, the tortured howl of a spacecraft tearing through the atmosphere, its hull superheated by the descent. Alira scrambled from her crude shelter, her elongated fingers clutching the cold edge of a rock formation as she turned her gaze skyward. There, through the swirling violet clouds, came a fireball. It was too small to be an asteroid, too erratic in its movements. This was a ship, damaged, breaking apart, barely holding together as it fought against gravity. Her twin hearts pounded. By the time the wreck slammed into the planet's surface, kicking up a shockwave of dust and ice, Alira was already moving. She found him half buried in the snow, his flight suit torn and covered in frost. A human. Alira had seen them before, never in person, only in the archives of her people. Their kind was new to the interstellar stage, reckless explorers with short lifespans and boundless ambition. She had never spoken to one, never even imagined she would. Yet here he was, unconscious, fragile, and dying. Instinct warred with logic. She could leave him. Another dead body on a dead world wouldn't change anything. But something deep inside her rebelled at the thought. With great effort, she hauled him back to her shelter. He woke 3 rotations later, coughing weakly. His eyes, such a strange color, that deep blue, blinked in confusion before they fixed on her. His reaction was immediate. Jesus Christ. He scrambled back, his injured body betraying him as pain shot through his limbs. Alira did not move, watching him with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "You are safe," she said, her voice soft but firm. The human stared at her, his breathing shallow. "Where?" "Eris 9. You crashed." His gaze darted around the dimly lit cave. "Who? What are you?" "I am Alira of the Varshani." The name meant nothing to him. That much was clear. He swallowed hard. "Jake," he muttered. "Jake Carter. Pilot." A silence stretched between them, tense and uncertain. Then he exhaled sharply, slumping back against the cave wall. Well, shit. Their survival became a fragile dance. Alira had spent years eking out an existence on this desolate world, scavenging what little the wreckage of her ship had provided. Now, she shared those meager resources with him. Jake was weaker than her, his species less suited to Eris 9's frigid climate. He needed warmth, food, and, above all, hope. She had none to offer, but he refused to surrender. Within days, he had begun repairing what remained of his crash site, salvaging components, piecing together a communication array from the broken remnants of his ship. Alira found herself drawn to his persistence. Where she had accepted her fate, he fought against it. And that fight was contagious. Weeks passed. Then, one day against all odds, we got it. Alira turned, seeing Jake standing in the entrance of their shelter, grinning through cracked lips. "The distress beacon," he said. "It's up. Somebody's gonna hear us." Her twin hearts clenched. "Do not hope," she warned. "The void does not listen." Jake shook his head, undeterred. "Then we make it listen." But Eris 9 was not empty. Something stirred beneath its frozen surface. And it had heard them. At first, the sound was subtle, just a faint tremor beneath their feet. Alira barely noticed it, attributing it to the frequent ice quakes that racked Eris 9's surface. But then it came again. Louder. Closer. Jake froze mid-sentence, his fingers hovering over the scavenged control panel of the beacon. "Tell me that was just the wind." Alira didn't answer. She was already moving, grabbing the crude weapon she had fashioned from the wreckage of her ship, an energy rifle with barely enough power left for a few shots. The ground shuddered again. This time, a low, guttural vibration echoed through the cavern walls, like a distant growl. Jake's face paled. I take it this planet isn't as dead as we thought. Alira clenched her jaw. Something is waking up. Then the ice split open. The creature was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. A nightmare of obsidian chitin and glistening, blade-like appendages, it erupted from the frozen ground with terrifying speed. It was massive, easily the size of a drop ship, its segmented body twisting as it emerged from the darkness below. Jake barely had time to react before Alira shoved him aside. A fraction of a second later, one of the creature's serrated limbs slammed into the ground where he had been standing. "Move," she shouted. Jake scrambled to his feet, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Any idea what the hell that thing is?" "A predator," Alira said grimly. "It has been waiting beneath the surface, waiting for prey." The beacon. The realization hit Jake like a punch to the gut. Their signal, their one hope of rescue, had also been a dinner bell. The creature lunged. Alira fired. The energy rifle spat out a weak, flickering blast of plasma. It struck the creature's carapace, barely scorching the surface. The beast recoiled, but only for a moment. Then it turned its many-eyed gaze toward her, mandibles clicking in what Jake could only assume was hunger. "We need bigger guns," he muttered. Alira didn't respond. She was already moving, leading the creature away from the beacon, deeper into the ice tunnels she had spent years mapping. Jake hesitated for only a second before cursing under his breath and following. The tunnels were a labyrinth of frozen corridors, twisting and shifting with each ice quake. Alira knew them well, but the predator was fast, too fast. A shriek echoed through the cavern as the creature slashed at the walls, sending shards of ice cascading around them. "We can't outrun it forever," Jake panted. Alira skidded to a halt. "We do not need to outrun it." Jake barely had time to process her words before she grabbed his wrist and yanked him into a side tunnel. Narrow, barely large enough for them to squeeze through. The predator lunged after them. And then the ice gave way. For a moment, there was only freefall. Jake's stomach lurched as he plummeted into the darkness, ice and debris tumbling alongside him. He barely managed to twist midair before crashing onto a sloping ledge. Pain exploded through his shoulder, but he was alive. "Alira," he called. A groan echoed from above. He turned just in time to see her drop down beside him, landing far more gracefully than he had. "Are you hurt?" she asked. Jake winced. "Only my pride." Their moment of relief was short-lived. Above them, the predator screeched in fury, its massive bulk struggling to fit through the narrow gap. For now, they were safe. But not for long. Alira exhaled sharply, scanning their surroundings. The cavern they had fallen into stretched deep into the planet's crust, illuminated by faint bioluminescent veins running along the walls. Strange, alien formations jutted from the ground, structures that looked almost artificial. Jake frowned. "Tell me I'm not the only one seeing this." Alira's expression darkened. This was not made by nature. They moved cautiously, the eerie glow casting long shadows as they navigated the ruins. The walls were inscribed with intricate carvings, spirals, glyphs, depictions of towering figures with elongated limbs and many eyes. "This place," Alira murmured. "It is ancient." Jake ran a hand over one of the carvings, feeling the cold, smooth surface. "Who built it?" Alira's twin hearts pounded. "My people believed Eris, 9 was lifeless. We were wrong." A sudden hum filled the air. Jake spun around, eyes widening as the walls came to life, glowing with an unnatural light. Symbols flickered, shifting, rearranging themselves. Then, a voice, deep, resonant, and impossibly old, echoed through the cavern. "You are not welcome." The air grew heavy, charged with an unseen force. Jake swallowed. "Well, that's not ominous at all." Alira gripped his arm, her voice urgent. "We need to leave. Now." But the ground trembled once more. This time, not from the predator above. Something else was waking up. The tremors grew stronger, shaking dust and shards of ice from the cavern ceiling. The ancient symbols pulsed with a deep, eerie glow, as though responding to an unseen command. Jake tightened his grip on the jagged piece of metal he had scavenged earlier. A poor excuse for a weapon, but better than nothing. Tell me that voice was just a weird echo. Alira's face was rigid with fear, something he hadn't seen before. No, she whispered. Something is still here. As if to confirm her words, the walls of the cavern split open with a sudden, grinding shift. From the darkness beyond, towering figures emerged. They weren't living. At least, not in the way Jake understood life. They were machines, massive, bipedal constructs made of obsidian-like metal, their limbs elongated and jointed in ways that defied human engineering. Their heads were featureless, save for a single glowing slit where eyes should have been. And they were moving toward them. Intruders. The voice boomed again, no longer disembodied. It came from the machines. Jake took an instinctive step back, his mind racing. Alira, any chance we can reason with these guys? Alira's fingers twitched toward her rifle. Not likely. Then the machines attacked. The first blast of energy hit the ground inches from Jake's feet, sending him sprawling backward. The heat from it singed his flight suit, and he barely rolled aside before another streak of light seared through the air. Alira moved faster. She ducked, spun, and fired in quick succession. The first shot barely scorched the nearest machine's surface. The second shot, aimed at a joint, caused the limb to jerk awkwardly, but it kept coming. They are resistant to plasma, she shouted. Fantastic. Jake gritted his teeth. So how do we kill them? Alira didn't answer, because at that moment, the ground beneath them buckled. The cavern was collapsing. Something, whether the seismic shifts caused by the predator above or the energy weapons from the machines, had destabilized the ice layers. A deep, resonant crack echoed through the chamber. Then the floor dropped out from under them. Jake barely had time to scream before he was falling again, Alira beside him. They plummeted through the darkness, the rush of cold air stealing Jake's breath. The faint glow of the ancient structures above receded rapidly, swallowed by the void below. Then, impact. Jake hit something hard and unyielding. The shock rattled through his bones, and for a moment, all he could do was gasp in pain. Alira landed more gracefully, though she grimaced as she rolled to a stop. Jake groaned, pushing himself up. Okay, I am officially done falling. Alira barely paid him any attention. She was already on her feet, scanning their surroundings. The new chamber they had fallen into was unlike the one above. This one was vast, stretching out in every direction, its walls lined with more of the glowing inscriptions. But in the center of it all, half buried in the ice, was something different. A ship. Jake sucked in a sharp breath. It was enormous, larger than anything he had ever seen, its surface smooth and dark, covered in the same alien glyphs as the walls. Unlike the ruins, this ship looked intact. And it was old. Very old. Alira took a slow, reverent step forward. This is not Varshani, she murmured. Jake frowned. Then whose is it? Before she could answer, the glyphs along the ship's hull flickered. And then, a door, silent, seamless, began to open. Alira's instincts screamed at her to run. Whatever this ship was, whatever secrets it held, it was waking up. A hissing sound filled the chamber as pressurized air, stale from eons of dormancy, vented from the opening hatch. Cold mist billowed outward, curling around their feet. Jake instinctively reached for Alira's arm. I have a very bad feeling about this. She didn't move. Because from the darkness of the ship's interior, a shape appeared. A figure. It stepped forward slowly, its form tall and unnervingly thin, its skin a pale, metallic sheen. At first, Jake thought it was another machine, another of the constructs that had attacked them above. But then it spoke, and its voice was not like the others. Leave this place. Jake tensed. Okay. Yeah, definitely planning on it. The figure tilted its head, its silver eyes locking onto Alira. You do not understand, it said. You have awakened something that should have remained buried. A deep, low rumble shuddered through the chamber. Alira took a step closer, her voice steady despite the growing dread in her eyes. What is this place? The figure didn't answer. Instead, it slowly raised a long, slender hand, pointing past them, toward the depths of the cavern. Jake turned, and his breath caught in his throat. Beyond the ancient ship, deeper into the abyss, something stirred. Something massive. Something alive. The frozen ice began to crack. Jake swallowed hard. I think we just found out what that predator was afraid of. The silver-eyed being's voice was calm, but absolute. You must leave. Now. The ground trembled violently. The ice was breaking apart. Whatever was buried here, whatever had been sleeping for untold millennia, was waking up. And it was hungry. The cracks spread like lightning bolts across the frozen surface. Deep below, something shifted, an immense shadow moving beneath the fractured ice. Jake felt the tremors through his boots. Okay, that is way too big. I vote we run now and ask questions later. Alira, however, remained fixated on the silver-eyed figure. What is down there? The figure did not blink. An extinction. Jake paled. That's not vague and ominous at all. But before Alira could demand more answers, the ice exploded. Shards of frost and debris rocketed into the air as an enormous form burst from beneath the frozen surface. It was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. Its shape was fluid, shifting between solid and semi-translucent states, like liquid darkness forced into a living form. It had no eyes, just a gaping maw lined with writhing tendrils, each pulsating with a dim, sickly green glow. And it was hungry. A deep, bone-rattling howl filled the cavern, a sound that resonated in Jake's skull like a psychic scream. He clutched his head, gritting his teeth. Alira, I really think we should leave now. Alira didn't hesitate. She grabbed Jake's arm and ran. The silver-eyed figure simply watched. The creature moved with terrifying speed for something so massive. Its shifting form slithered and lunged, obliterating everything in its path. The ancient ruins crumbled beneath its sheer weight as it pulled itself free from the ice. Jake didn't look back. He didn't have to. The sheer presence of it pressed against his senses like an unbearable weight. Where are we even going? He shouted. Alira's mind raced. There is only one way out. She veered sharply toward the ancient ship, the very thing they had awoken. Jake nearly stumbled. Are you kidding me? We're running toward the creepy ghost ship. But Alira wasn't listening. The silver-eyed being had stepped aside, as if it already knew what they were about to do. The ship's entrance was still open. Jake didn't have time to argue. The creature behind them let out another horrifying, guttural shriek, the kind of sound that made every cell in his body scream to run faster. They dashed inside, and the doors slammed shut behind them. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, dim lights flickered to life along the ship's corridors. Strange glyphs pulsed in rhythmic patterns, and the stale, frozen air inside began to warm. Jake stumbled forward, gasping. Please tell me this thing can fly. Alira wasn't sure. She had never seen technology like this before, not in any Varshani archive, not in any known civilization. And yet, it felt old. Older than her people. Older than Eris, 9 itself. She turned to the silver-eyed being, who had stepped inside as calmly as if it had all been part of its plan. What is this place? She demanded. The being's glowing eyes met hers. A prison. Jake groaned. Oh, fantastic. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Alira's mind reeled. A prison for what? The ship shuddered. Outside, through the translucent walls, they could see it, the creature. It was no longer just a massive beast. It was growing, changing, feeding off the energy of the awakened ruins. Tendrils of darkness lashed out, seeking, searching, multiplying. And then, as if sensing the ship, it turned its featureless face toward them. Alira felt the pressure in her skull intensify. The thing was trying to speak, not with words, but with hunger. It didn't just want to consume them. It wanted to become them. Jake swore under his breath. Tell me this ship has weapons. The silver-eyed being stepped forward. It is not a ship. Alira's breath caught. Then what is it? The being raised one hand. The glowing glyphs shifted, rearranging themselves. And suddenly, the walls around them moved. Panels unfolded, reshaping the interior. The floor beneath them hummed, and an energy field flickered to life around the ship. No, not a ship. A lock. A containment vessel. Jake's eyes widened. This whole thing was built to hold that? He pointed toward the creature outside. The silver-eyed being finally nodded. It is called the Hollow. Alira had never heard the name before. But the moment it was spoken, something inside her remembered. Not her own memories. Not her people's. Something older. A war. A war against something that should never have existed. She staggered, gripping the wall. We need to seal it back in. The Hollow shrieked. The entire structure trembled as it launched itself at the ship. Jake barely managed to brace himself before impact. The Hollow slammed into the ship's exterior, the force so great that alarms blared to life. He turned to Alira. Tell me you have a plan. Alira was already moving, scanning the glowing glyphs, trying to understand them. This wasn't her technology, but she had spent years studying forgotten ruins, deciphering lost languages. She had one chance. She pressed her palm against a panel and whispered a command. The ship, the prison, began to react. The walls brightened. The energy field around them expanded, rippling outward. The hollow shrieked as tendrils of dark energy were pulled back, recoiling from the force. It was working, but not fast enough. The hollow fought back, its mass pressing against the ship, forcing cracks into the ancient structure. Jake gritted his teeth. Not to rush you, but we're about 5 seconds from being hollow food. Alira's eyes locked onto the silver-eyed being. Help me. For the first time, the being hesitated. Then it stepped forward, placing its hand over hers. A pulse of pure energy surged through the room. Outside, the hollow let out a final, agonized scream as the prison reactivated, sealing it in a massive wave of golden light. And then silence. The hollow was gone. Jake let out a long, shaky breath. Is it over? Alira didn't answer. Because deep inside her mind, something still whispered. Something wasn't right. And then, the silver-eyed being spoke once more. You did not destroy it. Jake stiffened. What? The being turned its glowing gaze toward them. You only delayed it. And beneath the ice, somewhere farther, deeper, something stirred. Something older than even the hollow itself. Something that had just noticed them. A low, almost imperceptible hum filled the air. Not sound. Not words. Something older, deeper, a presence brushing against their minds like a cold breath over exposed nerve endings. Jake stumbled back, his fingers twitching over his makeshift weapon. I thought we just won? Alira didn't respond. She was frozen in place, staring past the silver-eyed being, past the sealed hollow, towards something deeper in the cavern. The walls, once illuminated with ancient glyphs, dimmed. The ship, the prison, whatever it had been, was afraid. The silver-eyed being turned to them. You must leave. Now. Jake exhaled sharply. Yeah, been trying to do that since I crashed here. Alira ignored him, stepping closer to the being. What did we awaken? The being's luminous eyes didn't waver. The hollow was only a fragment. A piece of something much greater. Jake clenched his fists. Greater. A low vibration pulsed through the chamber. The ice beneath them creaked. The air thickened, pressing down like invisible hands tightening around their throats. Then, the whisper started. Alira staggered. They weren't words. They were thoughts. Memories not her own. Visions of worlds consumed, of empires erased, of civilizations twisted into something other. Jake grabbed her arm. Alira? What's wrong? She gasped, shaking herself free from the visions. It's awake. Jake's stomach turned to ice. What is awake? The silver-eyed being's expression darkened. The Devourer. Jake let out a ragged breath. I hate that name. I hate everything about that name. The silver-eyed being ignored him. It placed a hand against the wall, and the symbol shifted again. A new pattern formed, a shape that was almost recognizable to Alira. A star map. But it wasn't a map of any known galaxy. It was something else, something older than the stars themselves. Alira's voice was barely a whisper. What is the Devourer? The being turned to her. The first hunger. The temperature in the chamber seemed to plummet. Jake crossed his arms. Yeah, okay, not cryptic at all. Alira didn't share his sarcasm. Her mind raced through the history of the Varshani, of everything she had studied, everything she knew. But there was nothing about this. The hollow had been a fragment of it? A mere piece of something worse? How do we stop it? She asked. The silver-eyed being hesitated. You cannot. Jake's jaw clenched. That's a hell of a motivational speech. The being studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, it lifted a hand and placed it on Jake's chest. Jake flinched at the contact. Buddy? What are you? And then, a flash of memory. Not his own. A fleet of ships, impossibly vast, stretching across the void. Stars snuffed out like candle flames. Planets consumed by shifting, writhing shadows. A war fought not with weapons, but with existence itself. And at the center of it all, a void with no form. Not a creature. Not a being. Something before time. Something that should not be. Jake gasped, stumbling back. The vision ended. The ship's dim lights flickered. His hands were shaking. Alira grabbed him. Jake. He looked at her, his pupils blown wide with terror. I saw it, he whispered. I saw what it did. Alira turned back to the silver-eyed being, dread clawing at her insides. Why show him? The being's voice was soft. Because he has seen it before. Alira's breath caught. What? Jake shook his head, gripping his skull as if trying to hold his mind together. That's not possible. I'm human. But even as he said it, something inside him knew it wasn't true. The whispering in the dark grew louder. Jake Carter had seen the Devourer before. He just didn't remember. A tremor ripped through the chamber. The silver-eyed being staggered, its glowing form flickering. The ship, the prison, was coming apart. Alira's voice was sharp. We have to leave. Now. Jake forced himself to focus. How? My ship is scrap metal, and I'm guessing this thing isn't exactly space-worthy anymore. The silver-eyed being looked toward the central console. There is one way. Alira's heart pounded. Tell us. The being hesitated for only a moment. Then it pressed a hand to the control panel. The symbols flared, shifting rapidly. The star map changed, zooming in on one location. A rift. Jake squinted. Is that a wormhole? Alira's breath hitched. No. It's something older. The silver-eyed being turned to her. A door. Jake's stomach twisted. A door to where? The being's expression darkened. To the place the Devourer was cast. Silence. Jake took a sharp step back. Oh hell no. You want us to go to where that thing was locked away? You're out of your mind. Alira didn't move. Her twin hearts hammered against her ribs. Because she understood. If the Devourer had truly awakened, if the Hollow had only been a fragment, then there was no running from this. No hiding. No one in the known universe would be safe. She turned to Jake, her voice calm, but absolute. We have to go. Jake stared at her like she had lost her mind. Alira. She grabbed his hand. We have to. Because if they didn't, then the Devourer would come to them. The ship shuddered again, the last of its energy reserves draining. The silver-eyed being stepped forward, its form flickering. You must go now. The door will not remain open. Jake inhaled sharply. He had survived a crash, a planet that wanted him dead, a creature that ate worlds. And now he was going to walk into whatever had created that monster? He turned to Alira. She wasn't afraid. Or rather, she was afraid. But she was ready. Jake exhaled. You're really gonna make me do this, aren't you? Alira squeezed his hand. And then, before he could talk himself out of it, she activated the controls. The air split open. A doorway of swirling midnight and starlight appeared before them, humming with an ancient, terrifying energy. Jake took a deep breath. Then, together, they stepped through. And the universe changed forever. Stepping through the rift felt like being unmade. For a fleeting second, if time even existed in this place, Jake felt himself stretch, his consciousness pulled in 1,000 directions at once. He saw flashes of impossible things, galaxies collapsing in reverse, civilizations blinking out of existence as though they had never been, beings with shapes that hurt to comprehend. And then, they landed. Jake hit the ground hard, gasping for air, except there wasn't air. Not really. Not in the way he knew it. It wasn't space. It wasn't a planet. It was somewhere else. A sky that wasn't a sky stretched endlessly above them, swirling with shifting colors that Jake's brain refused to process. The ground beneath him wasn't rock or ice, but something alive, pulsing faintly with a slow, rhythmic hum, like a heartbeat that had never belonged to anything human. Alira staggered beside him, blinking rapidly, her body tense as she adjusted. Jake groaned. I hate it here already. Alira scanned the endless, shifting horizon. This place, it is not natural. Jake scoffed. Gee, you think. Then he turned and froze. Because they were not alone. Figures surrounded them. Dozens of them. Not creatures. Not hollow. Something else. They stood tall and elongated, their forms draped in flowing, tattered garments that seemed to shift between solid and spectral. Their faces were obscured by smooth, featureless masks, save for their eyes, dark, endless voids, like holes carved into the universe itself. Alira sucked in a breath. I know what they are. Jake's grip tightened around his useless weapon. Care to share? Her voice was barely above a whisper. They are the ones who sealed the Devourer away. The moment she spoke, the figures moved, not walking, but shifting, as though they had never quite been standing still in the first place. One of them, taller than the rest, raised a hand. A voice, not spoken, but felt, pulsed through Jake's mind. You should not be here. Alira squared her shoulders. We had no choice. The figure turned its gaze toward Jake. He does not remember. Jake stiffened. Okay, that's the second time someone said that. I'm getting really sick of the whole mysterious past thing. Alira ignored him. If you sealed the devourer away, you must know how to stop it. The figures shifted again, the air around them thickening with unseen pressure. You do not stop it. You only delay it. Jake exhaled sharply. You guys suck at pep talks. Alira's twin hearts pounded. Then why are we here? For a long, dreadful moment, silence. Then, the figure gestured, and the universe folded around them. Visions flooded their minds. A time before recorded history. Before Varshani, before humans, before anything they had ever known. A war, waged before time itself took form. The devourer was not a creature. It was not even a being. It was the absence of being, the first hunger, the first thing that had ever existed and yet did not exist at all. It did not conquer. It did not destroy. It unmade. Entire civilizations erased, their histories consumed so utterly that they had never even been possible to begin with. The beings standing before them, the forgotten ones, had fought it. They had given everything to contain it. And Jake had been there. He saw himself, not as a human, not as he was now, but as something else, fighting beside them. But the memories were fractured, wrong, like looking at a reflection in broken glass. The vision ended. Jake stumbled, his breath ragged. That wasn't real. The forgotten one tilted its head. It was, and it will be again. Alira steadied him, her voice urgent. Why show us this? The being's dark eyes burned into them both. Because the devourer does not forget. Jake went cold. And then, somewhere in the distance, in the swirling void beyond, something moved. A shadow, impossibly vast, stirring from its eternal prison. The devourer had noticed them. Jake took a step back. We need to leave. Right now. Alira wasn't listening. She was watching the forgotten ones, her mind racing. If we can't stop it, then what do we do? The lead figure reached out and placed a single finger on Jake's forehead. Jake's vision exploded. A star. A weapon. A choice made long ago. A sacrifice. And then, darkness. He gasped, staggering backward, his mind reeling. You want me to? The forgotten one nodded. Jake's hands curled into fists. No. No way. I didn't sign up for this. Alira grabbed him. What did they show you? His voice shook. The only way to stop the devourer, he swallowed hard, is to become what I was before. Alira's breath caught. And what were you? Jake met her gaze, his expression a mixture of fear and certainty. Something ancient stirred behind his eyes. I was the one who locked it away. Silence. Alira's twin hearts pounded. Then you know how to do it again. Jake clenched his jaw. Yeah. The ground shook. The devourer was coming. The forgotten ones stepped back, their figures dissolving into the air. Their part was over. Jake looked at Alira, exhaling shakily. This is it. We either stop it here. He turned toward the encroaching darkness, his hands glowing with power he didn't remember having. Or we lose everything. Alira nodded. Then, together, they ran toward the end of the universe. The void trembled. The devourer was no longer sleeping. It had noticed them, just as the forgotten ones had feared. And now, it was coming. Jake stood motionless, watching as the vast nothingness coalesced into something almost tangible, a shape that defied form, a wound in the universe itself. The sky, or what passed for a sky in this place, darkened, light vanishing as the creature fed upon the very fabric of reality. It did not move like a living thing. It did not roar like a beast. It simply was. And it was hungry. Alira tightened her grip on Jake's arm. We don't have much time. Jake exhaled sharply, flexing his fingers. That strange energy, the power the forgotten ones had awakened in him, burned beneath his skin, threatening to unravel something deep inside him. Something he had forgotten. Something he had once been. The last time he faced the devourer, he had won. But the price. He had given up everything. And now, he had to do it again. The forgotten ones had shown him the answer. The devourer couldn't be killed. It wasn't a creature. It was a force, a thing that existed outside of time, outside of everything. But it could be locked away, just as he had done before. Jake turned to Alira, his breath unsteady. I remember now. She studied his face, searching for something in his expression. What do you remember? His voice was quiet. The first time I stopped it, I wasn't human. Alira's twin hearts skipped a beat. Then what were you? Jake swallowed. He didn't know the name for what he had once been. All he knew was that he had been different, something not bound by time, not bound by the laws of the universe. And when he had sealed the devourer away, he had broken himself apart, scattering his essence into the cosmos. Somehow, he had become human. A normal life. A second chance. But now, the universe was demanding that he remember. Jake took a deep breath. I know what I have to do. The devourer descended, its tendrils of endless hunger reaching toward them. Alira raised her weapon, but Jake grabbed her wrist. No, she frowned. Jake. His eyes were changing, glowing with the same impossible energy that had once burned within the Forgotten Ones. I have to finish what I started. Alira shook her head, fear flashing across her face. No, we do this together. Jake smiled, a sad, tired smile. I don't think that's possible. And then, before she could stop him, he let go of everything. Jake's body lit up, golden light pouring from his skin. His memories rushed back, entire lifetimes unfolding in an instant. He had been a warrior once, a guardian of the universe, and he had given it all up. Now he was taking it back. The power surged through him, the same energy that had once sealed the devourer away. He stepped forward, and the darkness recoiled from him. The universe itself seemed to bend around him, as if it recognized what he was becoming. Jake turned, his glowing eyes locking onto Alira's. I won't forget you. And then, he became the lock. The energy exploded outward, washing over the devourer like a tidal wave of pure light. The creature shrieked, its tendrils writhing as reality itself collapsed around it. Jake's power wrapped around the devourer, sealing it, forcing it back into the void from which it had come. And then, everything went white. Alira woke up alone. She was back on Eris, 9, the swirling violet sky stretching endlessly above her. The air was still, the silence absolute. For a moment, she thought it had all been a dream. But then, she felt it. The absence. The devourer was gone. And so was Jake. She swallowed hard, pushing herself up. The ship, the prison, was still here, its walls humming faintly with residual energy. She placed a hand against its surface. Jake. Nothing. No answer. Her twin hearts ached. He had saved the universe. But at what cost? Days passed. Then weeks. Alira searched for a way to bring him back, tracing every forgotten archive, every lost technology. But Jake Carter was gone. Or so she thought. One night, as she watched the sky, a single flicker of golden light streaked across the horizon. And in the back of her mind, so faint she almost thought she imagined it, she heard his voice. I won't forget you. A slow smile crossed her lips. She touched her chest, where her twin hearts beat strong, and whispered back, neither will I.